We're live. Welcome in, everybody. It's Wednesday, 11:03 a.m. Central. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you can see us in the in your YouTube, and make sure you can also hear us okay. I'm joined with two very special guests today. I'm sure everybody in the Tesla community already knows the superstar Alexandra Merz. She's joining me again today to discuss a lot of things in the Elon Musk world, and we also have a very special guest with us today. I'll throw it over to Alexandra to maybe give us a brief intro, and then I'll allow Ron to also just tell us everything about him. So, Alexandra, take it.
Thank you, Farza. Thank you for hosting us. So I'm very honored to introduce Ron Carter to the Tesla community. Ron actually reached out to me when we started discussing, does the Twitter noise and all that really have an impact on Tesla, on other companies for of Elon and for us on the share price. And he contacted me and said, look, I have been in government services for nearly 30 years. I've worked for Homeland Security. I've worked for the military, for defense. I'm 28 or 25 years, Marine Corps soldier. I've worked overseas in a lot of places. I was in charge as a chief of staff for the TSA implementation after September 11th. September 11th. And the whole subject came around, how can you avoid making more noise than necessary? How will government agencies react to what Elon is doing? Is it a danger to Tesla stock? Because we all have some. So I said, well, we should talk more and we should do this publicly. And I'm very honored that Ron accepted. And so here we are. Ron, you want to say a little bit more about yourself? You know yourself much better than I will ever.
Well, I appreciate that. You're very kind, both of you, in your introductions. I've enjoyed all of my discourse with Alexandra. As I pointed out in, I think, our first conversation, I'm so fond of the name Alexandra that my oldest daughter is named Alexandra. So
good choice.
That holds a particular place with me. And then Alexandra was very kind to introduce me to Farzad. And I've got a musical connection with him. He's a guitarist. My father was a virtuoso guitarist. I grew up in the music community here in Nashville. So, which has actually been very instrumental, pardon the pun.
No pun intended.
That's right. In any success that I've been able to enjoy through my adult life, my professional life, because I was able to learn connection and professionalism in a very unique way through the example of my father. And I won't elaborate too much, but almost any guitar you hear on a Simon and Garfunkel record it's either my dad or Paul, Roy Orbison, all the Nashville people, the folk scene. He was on 3 Dylan albums, 3 Baez albums. That list goes on, and those people, he didn't just work with them, they were his friends and colleagues, and he welcomed them into our home. So I'm 9 years old and I'm serving coffee to Paul Simon, and I'm hearing them tell jokes while at the same time, they're talking about world events, how that translates into a song, the impact on contract support from the label. What does that mean in international copyright and sheet music and tour support? And so it was just a very comprehensive, but yet he had to be technically proficient as well. And to see the unspoken communication between he and other musicians and what they did and how professionally they did it and how you show up on time and you work comfortably within a group. But when it's time to step into the spotlight, regardless of what instrument you're playing, then you're not afraid to do that and you're prepared to do it. So this has paid lifelong dividends for me, which is why, I highlight it. And when I see the situation with Elon right now, there needs to be some sort of a bridge there so that he can be more effective. We all know what the potential of Tesla is, what the potential of Twitter is in this acquisition. There's no question that Twitter very rapidly will be brought into a world-class platform, which it was not before, in every regard, whether it's privacy, whether it's commerce, whether it's a safe place to have public discourse. All of those things, the technical piece of that will be brilliant. The interface will be fantastic. It'll be robust. This is a different animal, though, than everything else Elon has touched. Everything else is a math set. It's big data, right? There's a common thread in production, how the car works, open AI. All of these things are math problems. They're straight engineering, whether it's software or hardware. Twitter's got that as well, but it is differentiated this time because it's outside of his strength in terms of social connection, social discourse, etc. And it's so public and it's politically energizing that if it's not handled well, then you are threatened by it. On the other side of it, if it's handled well, then small problems stay small and they don't grow into something much larger. So that was the nature of the conversation that Alexandra and I engaged privately. I didn't know that we would be discussing it publicly until I was
pushed
invited.
you.
Surprise.
So that's okay. So anyway, we can discuss any and all of that to whatever good is for your platform, Farzad,
For sure,
your audience. So
I'll sort of start off by going off of what you just said, and anybody, just let's make a conversation, jump in whenever, right? Because there's just so much to unpack there. So when I envision, so the first thing that jumps out to me based on what you said was, okay, Elon Musk is somebody that is likely going to have challenges with this new venture because of the social aspect of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm going to try to do is put on my hat of the community to try and also bring their concerns forward or how they're viewing this, and also kind of chip in my opinions here and there. But the engineering solution aspect of Twitter, so getting it to where it needs to be from a platform perspective and having it be a great product. Some will say that that's really all that's required here to ensure that the future of say Elon Musk and his companies are successful, because you're, in the end, if you build something that everybody's going to use, it doesn't necessarily matter how you get there. It's all about getting there.
Right.
So what do you guys think about that? How do you guys think about that?
Well, it's not. And that's the whole reason why we want to talk to Ron, because contrary to having cars, and there will be some government agencies involved, and we'll talk about that certainly a little bit later for FSD and other processes, but Twitter is a platform that's really public, and it is probably the best public social media where people can exchange political ideas, lifestyle ideas, whatever. It's the quickest, it's the sharpest, and he'll make it even better. I don't think anybody has any doubt that how technically this can become a much better platform. And I'm actually, annoyed with all this discussion of should advertisers come back or not. Advertisers are the least problem of coming back to Twitter, and I really don't want to concentrate on that today, and I don't think we should ever concentrate on advertisers being off and on. It is really about this becoming a titan of communication in the whole, at least Western world, and who has influence over it and who does not, or does anybody still have influence over it or not. And I think Elon is quite, I don't think naive is the right word, but I don't find a better one. He's quite naive in thinking it just needs to be a better platform and open speech and everything will be solved. Well, it's not going to be solved. And that's, please jump in, Ron, that's where our discussions really started.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that is the concern. And, privately, I had expressed to you the example of Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. Facebook had gained, a large following early, but it didn't explode until the platform was humanized in some form and had a much warmer and personal connection once he hired Sheryl Sandberg. And it wasn't Mark being the sole face of Facebook. I think Tesla and Elon are in the same position now. I had a very, very valuable lesson. I'm a little bit like Elon. I'm an INTJ. It's a very, it's one of the rarest Myers-Briggs personality types, the mastermind, highly organized, a little fussy, all of that, right? Very hard driving, 2% to 3% of the population. So I get that. My father was so helpful to me to have that presence. I was flying cross country one time to a conference with an Air Force lieutenant colonel from Camp Lejeune all the way to El Paso in a twin-engine plane. We had to go to this aviation conference, and my parents at the time were living in Northeast Louisiana, which is their home in Winsboro, and which is about halfway to El Paso. And the colonel says, I'm a young lieutenant. And he says, hey, why don't we stop and see your folks? And maybe your dad can play a tune for me on guitar or whatever. And so we landed at the little airport. Dad played some music. Mom put home cooking on the table, and we had a good time. And but my dad kind of pulled me aside at one point, and he's like, hey, what's up with the colonel or whatever? And I said, well, he kind of annoys me a little bit. And he had been very kind to me and was a good guy, but I don't remember exactly. I just thought he should do something a little better. And my dad was very instructive. He wasn't heavy-handed in his advice. But he said, son, it's okay to let people warm up to you. Don't be afraid to let people like you. And it just is enough for me. It's like Forrest Gump, right? Mama could always talk to me in a way I could understand it, right? And my dad could do that with me. And just that one small point to focus on how important it is to not be uptight all the time, not to take affront to every single slight. And at the end of the day, most people generally don't intend any harm. And if you let them help you and let them warm up to you, they will. And that's a much better place to be. And I think that's where we are with Elon right now. It's very, very difficult when you're being attacked personally. I don't think he would be in this political fight had he not been essentially wrongly and viciously attacked by Elizabeth Warren and others on the left. And he was so affronted that he has this, and I understand, this pathological need simply to make it right. That's an untruth, and it's a black or white issue for him of injustice, and I've got to do something about it. This is where we get into one of my favorite quotes, which we'll put the slide up later as the parting shot. But during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was obviously besieged on all fronts in the press, politically, because the war was not going well. And he was asked by the press, what are you going to do? And he said, I intend to come to work and do the job every day. I'm going to do the best I know how to do. And, at the end of the day, if I do it well, it won't matter what was said against me. And if I don't do it well, even if all of the angels in heaven were vouching for me, it wouldn't make any difference. I would still be done. So, and I think that's where we are. So this is simply a petition to Elon to let somebody help you, let somebody put a calmer face on this, because everything doesn't have to be a personal affront. And that's what's alarming people right now. I think they want stability. They want to know that something's predictable. And truthfully, there are a lot of people out there, professionals particularly, who've been carrying the banner for Elon for a long time. And they're starting to get a little weary of the this is the price of genius clarion call, right? Happy to support Elon. Don't expect that he's going to have the exact emotional or professional response that most of the population would have. Usually he's far more enlightened and he's on point. But by the same token, people are getting a little weary now, saying, well, wait a minute, at what point is the price of genius too much? And there's risk here. So that was the point of discussion with Alexandra.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think we should actually start from the point of all the different Elon companies, because in the end, he will need them. He will need the government support, and he will need these people not building up fences against him. And when I say building up fences, I mean, suddenly introducing new laws. Elon is acting in a lot of fields where there are no laws yet, just because the legislator is much late to come to the party. Let's think about Neuralink. We have today the presentation. There is no regulation defining what Elon is trying to do with Neuralink. Let's go to Starlink. Well, we're coming to SpaceX in a moment. Let's first go to boring tunnels. Well, he needs permits to dig his tunnels and get the exploitation rights for those. Then obviously SpaceX. I mean, with SpaceX, he had won so much goodwill, and I think the government is quite locked in. I still consider SpaceX, we talked about this before, really his joker. I don't think the government can go really front and center against Elon, because they need him on the SpaceX side and even on the Starlink side. I mean, Starlink in Ukraine, we all know the story, but that was in favor of what the United States wanted. And they're certainly not going to pull the plug on somebody who is so useful to them. So I do believe SpaceX gives us some cover, gives us some But he was at the height of goodwill, right? He was the golden boy of EVs. He was the golden boy of SpaceX. And we just want to make sure he's not ruining lots of this goodwill now with Twitter. And then obviously Tesla. I mean, we did some research together this week, Ron, looking at, do you really today need authorization from the government authorities, TSA or whatever, to start to call yourself level 4 or maybe even level 5 for full self-driving? And at the moment, nothing's in place, right? They defined what it is, but they didn't put a procedure yet in place where you would have to get an authorization. You can just auto-declare yourself level 4, and then what, right? So there is this void, this empty space at the moment where we probably will have government ruling and something happening, but we certainly don't want to, kill that idea now.
Well, that's right. But understanding how government is constructed or how it functions, they simply, it's a bureaucracy, right? And G. Gordon Liddy famously talked about in his autobiography, Will, when he was in prison, that he used the bureaucracy against itself, right? So when you put paper in, the bureaucracy is obliged to respond or to process that. And so he actually used that, for his own devices while he was in prison, while he was busy bugging the warden's office and doing other things like that. The government is, I got my master's at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. So one of the things that I learned there and through my own experience, and it was kind of a little bit of a difficult lesson, is it's easy to stand up and shake your fist at the government and say, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you doing it today? And that is a pervasive attitude in the general public that has come about since the time of FDR and the birth of the nanny state, right? If we put people in a time capsule and transported them back 120, 150 years to see what true liberty looked like when, you really had to be self-sufficient and there wasn't all this safety net and all the rest of it, people would be stunned. American democracy, what daily life looked like would be far different than what people expect today. But the fact of the matter is government's in place for stability. It's not in place for response. It will respond, but it's designed to respond slowly, specifically to provide stability in a general sense to the population, because that is important, right? Everything is about stability. And whether it's the nuclear family, whether it's how you vote, economics, all of that is supposed to be stable. So when you put something in the system, it's going to be slow to respond. With regards to FSD, the government doesn't have anything to measure against, right? They don't even know. I mean, the product is just now visible and it's certainly not mature. And they don't know, it hasn't been fielded enough to know exactly what the impact is in the real world, right? So they don't really have anything to respond to. And for the things that are happening out there, it's like the solar industry. The energy companies say in Florida, right? They've teamed with insurance to kill rooftop solar. It's a very interesting play. Well, in the case of Tesla, there have been lawsuits or accusations against FSD crashes and fatalities. The government hasn't responded to that with any form of a fine or anything. You can get into criminal proceedings very quickly for wrongful death and all the rest of it, right? Well, that hasn't happened because they've got such a robust data set that they can show driver error, that the equipment, the software is not at fault. And so the government doesn't have anything to go after because there's actually empirical evidence there to clear the company. I can assure you if that data wasn't there and it wasn't that trustworthy and robust, then you would begin to see the wheels of government turn. So anyway, they simply don't have anything to act against is what I'm driving at.
That brings me back to think, more I study Elon, more I think he's really a genius because he is trying to circle them from all sides. I mean, the example of FSD you've just given us, having the data, I'm sure Waymo has some data too, but since it's also geo-fenced and small, having the real time data of millions of cars worldwide now running just gives him such a stronger argument.
Right.
And in lots of happenings he is doing, I just feel he thought about all angles prior and put them in place so that whatever happens, he has the defense it's needed. And I'm very fond of that, and every time very astonished how it works. The only thing where I feel his hesitation, and it's more a feeling than a certitude, is like, I feel he wanted this free speech platform. He saw the potential for it. He sees how he can make this a profitable venture. I don't even think profit is his main goal, but he obviously doesn't want to pay for it for the rest of his life. Yet you feel like a little bit like, I don't have the same security measures already in place that I had put in place for SpaceX, that I had put in place for Starlink,
Right.
that I had put in place for Tesla. It's sort of he rushed into it, or he was rushed into it.
Right.
We all remember how it happened with the will he get it or not get it.
Yeah, if I could just, what comes to mind here is like, maybe, I mean, could just, somebody brought this up before, but could this whole thing just be a leverage play, knowing that something like a SpaceX, as an example that was thrown out, is so needed by the United States to ensure that they have supremacy from a space standpoint? Because we all know in the next 20 to 40 years, that's going to be incredibly important to be a country that can put satellites and other stuff up into space. And Elon knows that. He has by far,
ever.
right? And he's like, well, I can literally do whatever I want, because as soon as if they really, really, really do want to put me in a position where my stuff gets thrown out or quote unquote abused by the government, they will literally give up every single bit of chance they had to be successful in the future.
And
this is just, go ahead.
And I'd even add, you see how I mean, subtle is not the right word, but how he intervened on the political scene before the midterms, saying we really need a split Congress. Did you see yesterday how DeSantis and the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, came out to his defense?
Yeah.
I mean, this was
Should we play those clips?
I know a couple of people who don't think he's doing 4D chess, but this was a 4D chess move, right? By having now the House in the hands of the Republican, the rest of the Senate and the presidency in the House of the Democrats, he is much more protected than he was the last 2 years.
Yeah.
My question, though, is,
please,
was it necessary? He was going to have that protection regardless, because it was already front and center. Or he could have someone make that argument for him, right? I mean, you could get any number of surrogates and I guess that's my issue, is he could have an internal surrogate do this. He could have any number of external surrogates. When you have someone like Ron
explain
Barron,
us more, because I don't know how this works. Tell us more. How would you do this calmer than he's doing it?
We all have these small decision points, or how we evaluate different things in our professional lives, right? And we come to rely on those. And one of mine is, whenever I have to choose someone for a promotion or a leadership position, one of the things I focus on, and again, I get this from my dad and my parents, is so we all know situations where the smallest possible problem that should be insignificant gets blown up into a big fat hairy deal, right? But yet we also know people that whenever something comes up, it just always seems to disappear, and that's actually artful leadership and management, right? Who are the people who can keep small problems small, and who are the people who always blow it up into something that it didn't have to be, right? They created a problem that didn't need to exist.
I think you're nailing it right here,
so not to pat myself on the back, but I've got an extreme talent for keeping small problems small, and they just go away. And, where, the general will come up to me and say, hey, Ron, what happened to that thing, a couple of weeks ago that came up with this other general or the command, or this Marine that gave us a black eye in the public, right? And, oh, sir, I took care of that. And you're not breaking rules or anything, but you just know how to keep those problems small, and they just dissipate. They just go away, and people are happier, and problem solved. Likewise, I can think of one lady that I worked with a few years ago, and it didn't matter how small or insignificant the problem was. It literally was all you could do not to keep it from blowing up into front page headlines over nothing. And it's just, created turmoil internally, a lot of discontent, and it's just not worth it. And that's a little bit where we are right now. So when you've got the likes of, Elon has such influential people in his corner. Ron Barron, is an incredible spokesperson, not only on character but technical competence, and to have his imprimatur and vote of confidence, to let him go on CNBC and speak with Dan Ives or any of those hosts who are trying to give Tesla the business right now. That's far better than Elon doing it himself, I think. And I also think just focusing on progress. Hey, this is the social good, or these are that Tesla's doing right now. We've talked privately a little bit, and I don't know that they could ever get there. Think it's a good idea, but for Elon to pivot right now with his leadership team to publish simply, instead of these daily tweets and catching people off guard and energizing people, something that was a weekly publication that was just 3 or 4 bullet points from each one of the ventures, primarily Tesla, Twitter, and SpaceX, right? Those are the big ones. And say, there's so much good news this week. First bullet point is semi announcement on Thursday, first deliveries for Pepsi. That's the first bullet point. That's a positive. If they wanted to add something more to say, we'll have 50 vehicles delivered before the end of December, whatever that number is, that's a bullet point positive, not something you can dispute. The second bullet point would be like a Twitter example. We've closed loopholes on child endangerment in 3,000 sites or whatever, and they won't be able to breach that again, right? That is a huge
just
point.
Actual communication. Yeah,
it's just actual. It's calming. It's straightforward. It's something that is important to people, and it shows what issues you're focusing on. It also shows that you're making progress. It's just a very simple, down-to-earth, calming, here we are conversation. Right now, it's just frothy. People don't know which way things are going to swing, and we're back to the uncertainty thing. And just by human nature, with how we're built, we have to assume the worst for our own survival and protection, right? If you're out in the wild, like if I was in a plane crash right now in the middle of the mountains, all alone, I would have to assume the worst at every corner, simply for my own protection. That there would be a wild animal.
We're not there anymore.
I wouldn't find food, whatever that was. So that if that's the natural, the state of the human mind, you need to do something on the other side to be a calming influence rather than an inflaming influence.
So I have sort of a take on that, and I'm curious to hear both of your thought process. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And on the flip side, though, and I start with a question and then sort of go on, and you guys let me know if this makes sense. Do you think that the statements that Elon makes that causes that frothiness and that chaos, in a sense, does it have merit to it? Like, is it actually a legitimate statement that's being said that is truthful, but it's just so chaotic from who it comes from, and just the sort of the things that he's responsible for, that it's going to cause a lot of pain and sort of potential endangerment to his things? But if there is merit to them, do you think he sees it as, well, it's true, and I'm going to be the person that's going to fix it, and I think that people are going to be on the train with me because it needs to be fixed, and I'm willing to take a risk of that endangerment to whatever I've built so far to get to the end goal, and so fuck it. That's what we're going to do. Like, how do you guys think about that? Yeah.
Well, you're right. It actually has some merit to it, because he is taking all this dust away and just blowing it up, and that's it. And obviously sometimes making mistakes. Like, for example, he's delivering tomorrow the first semi to Pepsi and publishes 2 days ago a picture of his night table with Coca on it, right? I mean, sometimes you just wonder, is there any, marketing strategy, or is there none?
Right.
But I mean, even
trying to sell the Cybertrucks.
Exactly. So and everybody makes mistakes. Everybody will actually forgive him the mistakes, because he's so human and he's so approachable. And I mean, you got answers to your tweets yesterday, Fazel. I mean, how crazy is that, right? I mean, you
I wasn't even looking for
put out
it.
a tweet,
You just showed
and
up.
there he answers. Exactly, there is. So this is a major plus, but it's also a weakness. There's no doubt about it, because it makes him attackable and it brings all this
but people are
drama with
smart.
it.
The streets, people are smart. The street always knows, is something that I keep in my wheelhouse. You can't fool people. They have an innate sense of kind of what's going on with somebody, right? And there is a component of this that, we'll go back to the original SpaceX story. When he went to Russia, he made 3 trips over there, and the chief of the space program laughed at him and spat on his shoes. Well, that has essentially been the key driver for SpaceX, above all of the social good, above star exploration.
That is so true.
And so he was so affronted on a personal level. That's what the driver for SpaceX is, beyond all of the other stuff that he wants to do, right? And we're now, there's a component of this apparently with Twitter. Apparently there's some froth out there from years ago where some friend of Elon's got insulted. There was some dust up with Twitter, and he's never let go of it. He's sat there and marinated or fermented for
that's so Elon.
For 15 years. And I get that, but that's the danger, and people sense that. So
I'm curious. So as an INTJ, and actually when I took the test, I got the same thing, just FYI, like we're all 3 on the same, but like that to me, like that resonates with me, because I am like, that is what fires me, is like, like what? Like you just disrespected me.
You remember,
I'm gonna get it fucking done. How dare you? Like
I remember. I remember.
Good thing you all have women in your life, right? Bringing you down.
It's in a safe. Don't worry. Yeah, we're good.
I can. I mean, if I choose to focus on it, and this is the difference. You have to learn that you get to make your choice, because it defines who you are, how you live, what your values are. I can remember every slight. I can plan the demise of any organization, any person I've worked with. That's not bragging. I'm just saying, that doesn't advance me at the end of the day. It certainly doesn't advance other people or the organization. And you simply have to live by the higher good and make that choice.
I completely agree with you. And I think people like you, like Elon, the 2 of you, you easily are insulted when people insult your intelligence, right? When you feel that somebody doesn't understand how exceptional you all are, this becomes a personal moral high ground. This becomes something that that keeps stuck there, and you want to solve it.
Yeah, I lie to myself. I'm like, there's no way that's going to impact me. And then I'm like literally stewing on it the whole day. I'm like, no, it's totally impacting me. Like I'm lying to myself over here. Like I'm so pissed. Sorry. Go ahead, Alexandra. It's so true. Yeah.
But you just, I guess the way I see it, and I know that for all of his genius, we all have our challenges in how we connect. I'm not the world's best connector. By the same token, I can be pretty good. I love to go spend time on the shop floor. I ran big transportation operations for the Marine Corps, where I owned large shops, lots of big green toys running around. I'm the first one to grab a creeper and crawl underneath the truck and see what's going on. And I can tell you every nut and bolt or how the bearing works and whatever. I do all the maintenance on my cars. I always have. I love to get dirt and grease under my fingernails. And that's great to be able to connect that way. By the same token, it's just as much fun and gratifying to be able to throw on a suit and go be comfortable in a C-suite, right? And not everybody can do that, but that's what Elon needs. He needs someone who can comfortably float between all of these environments and actually connect them, whether you're junior or you're senior or everybody in between, and to calm those elements at the same time. You have to enjoy the connection and get a rush out of that. And I'm very happy that I do.
Let me take a like sort of a devil's advocate approach here, because this is such a fascinating discussion, and I think it's at the heart of why there is this tension in sort of the people that follow Tesla. Is that the way part of me views it is we finally have an example of an individual who has those traits, who has proven he can be successful in the past by being exactly who he is. And it's so counter and it's so weird, but it has worked thus far. So why can't it work into the future? And I think that is the very confounding aspect of this whole thing, because it's very obvious the kind of person he is, and it's very obvious that he's far from perfect. But
well, you don't want him to not be Elon. That's not the point of the discussion here. One of the hardest things in life that we all have to learn is to be comfortable enough in our own skin to simply do what we do well and leave the things that other people do well to let their star shine too, to let them succeed, right? There's enough room at the end or the table for everybody. And we're back to the music example, right? You play as part of the group, you're comfortable, you know what you're supposed to do, but there's room for everybody to have the solo or to be highlighted or step into the spotlight. And that's one of the things that's really difficult for young professionals to learn, is that you're going to get your day in the sun. You're going to have the chance to present to Elon or to the C-suite or whatever. That you're going to get your opportunity. You just need to be ready when that day comes. And if someone else gets their time in the spotlight a little earlier, don't take an affront to that. It's simply their time. Everybody can't be first. But so you're moving away from that competition, jealousy, all of that kind of thing. We want Elon to be Elon. We want him. We love his voice. We love every quirk about him. What we don't want is, we all know that it's kind of like, I lost my dad, 10, 11 years ago now. Now, my parents were great people. My dad had a huge, larger than life personality. But my mom took the edges or puts boundaries on my dad, right? So 80% of Fred was all you needed. 100% was too much and would actually play to his detriment. My mother is the same way in his absence now. I love my mom, and she is the dearest Christian person you would ever meet, right? But left to herself, 100% of Anna might go a little too far sometimes in some of her thoughts or ideas or how she lives. And so what we want Elon entirely to be himself, not asking him not to do that. We're not asking him to turn over every single thing, just completely let go of the reins and not be in touch or in charge or what have you. But wow, there's no reason to, we had this event in 2018, right, with the cave rescue in Thailand. And Elon jumps in as a superior engineer, says we can provide engineering expertise. It's worth saving these children, because this is obviously a very, very difficult and challenging problem. That's not the takeaway. The takeaway is it turned into a story of pedophilia, and that's the takeaway. That it's not the brilliant story. They did a Disney Plus documentary on that, which was very well done and was very moving to watch, to see exactly what it took to pull that rescue off. But the general public just knows that Elon called somebody a pedo guy, ended up going to court. And I think what Elon's retort would be is, well, I went to court and I won. I beat the guy. But that's not what's left.
That's not the story. Exactly.
That's true. But what's interesting there is that the reason why he made those statements in the first place was because the guy told him to shove it up his ass, because he questioned his ability and his intelligence.
And nobody talks about that anymore. Exactly.
That's right. But that's what started it, is that somebody questioned him.
Yeah. That's right. And again, I understand that.
There's right and wrong in that story. It's just what is left over. This is a good
100%.
example of what is left over as soon as Elon gets into the mess, right?
For sure.
And here's the other piece. The other piece of that is, we've seen the recent, and Alexandra and I shared this between us on DM. We all have our tribe where we're comfortable. I can see how comfortable Alexandra is, and I appreciate how comfortable she is dealing in high-end finance and legal and everything. There is
the best.
There is a
go check out her Substack. Pull up her Substack. I'm gonna pull it up. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is, it's like driving in a different city, right? You move, the driving convention in Paris is different than the driving convention in, say, New York, right? And you have to pick up on those cues. And so to be able to go into a boardroom or to speak and be received in the circle with Moody's and Standard and Poor's and all of that. That's a special place, and not very many people are granted entree. So they get it, right? We need.
No, I agree with you. And actually, it's funny because I would never, and we had this discussion with Father before, I would never intervene when you have those battery people. You know, there's so many geniuses out there in this Tesla community that have so much technical knowledge and so much engineering prowess and whatever, and I would feel completely stupid even adding the slightest sentence to it, because it's not my field. It's not where I have knowledge and where I can bring something to the table. The thing is, Elon obviously has so many more fields where he has it, but some of them he doesn't, and nobody has 100% of all the fields.
That's right.
And so sometimes
I'm sorry,
yeah,
I didn't mean to cut you off. Where I was heading with that is the element of this where Elon's tribe is the picture that was published last week, where he was with the remaining engineering team wearing a t-shirt, his hair's messed up, and he's just a bro. He's just hanging out with that segment of the population, which is an admittedly very narrow piece of the social spectrum, right? And it's cringe humor. So, what I put in front of Alexandra was, I was like, he needs to have a place to share his cringe humor. We all have things that we say. My best friend, I've known the guy for 56 years, right? And since we were 2-3 years old in church. And I can say things to Harold, who is an otherworldly aerospace engineer, by the way. But I can say things to him that I wouldn't say in this forum, right?
Sure, because he understands you. And he will maybe laugh about something that we will not even understand, right?
And some of that's cringe humor. And, I laugh at some of the things that Elon puts out there privately, but it doesn't mean that it should be shared. And
I agree with you. And if you don't mind, producer wife, if you can pull up that 4-color chart that I sent over. So this is from this book, Surrounded by Idiots. I don't know whether you can see that, from Thomas Erickson. And it's a very simplified measure, much less developed than what you all doing, on 4 color groups of people, right? And the blue are the engineers, right? And I know we have just the most of the blue in this world, and I'm really sorry to admit that I'm red. So, and probably when we're talking in our other forums with Ross and with Gary, well, Gary is blue and Ross is red, right? That just says it all. So while we are both blues and red are task orientated, the blues are introverted, are more passive, are more reserved, and just communicate within themselves. But what I want to show with this graph is the world is 4 times 25%, right? There are and these numbers are obviously not correct, but there are 25% of blues, and this Tesla world is mainly blues. But there are 75% of other people out there, and you might find Ross and me amusing and an extrovert and a bit different, and so you can relate to us. But you probably don't relate much to the yellows and the greens of this world. And the greens are typically people that are in decisive roles in government agencies, right? Because you have to be introvert, passive, reserved. Otherwise, you won't go into administration. But you're mostly not task-oriented because you're working on repetitive things. It's less of that, but you're more relation-oriented. So these people can get offended by Elon. And thank you, Cindy. Well, one of the goals in having this discussion today is really that we understand, first, Tesla is not at danger. That's my first thing. And why is it not at danger? Because the biggest shield we have is SpaceX, right? So just keep that in mind whenever you get nervous. Second, what is needed is actually not much. It is the need for Elon to accept that somebody has to smoothen out the mess he sometimes leaks, right? And make sure his message gets to the other 3 groups of people that are not blue, that are not straight away connecting with his way of talking, being, discussing, communicating.
I think actually you've touched on something, and if I'm jumping the gun here, Alexandra, then we can move this a little further. But just maybe to provide some perspective for the audience, because there has been so much froth. And we understand it changes by the minute, which is to say it changes by the tweet. So we understand that. But I don't think that Tesla or Elon has a huge amount of risk right now. I think I used the example in a DM that one of the most painful experiences I've ever had is to be out in the desert on military exercise and to get sand in my eyes. And if you've ever had that experience that way, it is one of the most excruciating things that you can have happen. And I guess what I said in the DM was that a single grain of sand in your eye can essentially disable you, right? I mean, you're not going to die. You're going to continue to be able to function, but it's excruciatingly painful. It obscures your vision. And if you don't do anything about it, then it can ruin your vision. And I would hate to see Elon's vision for Tesla and all of his other ventures to help people, help humanity, get derailed because he called some guy a pedo, or because he put out the Trump tweet, lead me not from temptation, or, the Texas Institute.
It's so funny though.
Yeah, but still, you can't respond. I'm sorry, you can't respond to Ed Markey, right? So let's use a Trump example. My 19-year-old daughter, this is a very energized household here, and fortunately we have very bright kids. And so she came in a couple of years ago, and she's 19, and she's our baby and doesn't really talk about these things very much. So I was surprised. She said, Daddy, so what do you think, Daddy-O, about the election? And so she specifically wanted to know how I felt about Trump and all of the froth out there because of the pandemic and all the rest of it. So we talked about it. And long story short, I still don't think Trump understands. If he would have listened to Melania, and I'm not advocating for Trump, or I'm neutral. I'm simply analyzing what we've got here, okay? There are elements about Trump that are noteworthy. There are elements of Trump that are absolutely abhorrent. So we get that. But if he would have listened to Melania and been a little more responsive to suburban moms, to calm basic human fears of stability or risk because of the pandemic, because kids aren't in school, are they getting the social interaction they're supposed to have, etc., right? If he would have simply done something a little bit differently there, he'd won the election. And this is exemplified in my 19-year-old Jackie, who says, we talked about it, and I gave her a little bit more of the adult answer of what it's like to deal with other despots, and you got to be strong and XYZ. And she said, yeah, but Daddy's just so unpleasant.
Yeah.
Right. That simple, basic sensibility.
Exactly.
And it's no more complicated than that. And if your pride or your ego gets in the way, or you get too far over into the Don Quixote syndrome, right, of going, now you're tilting at every windmill, and we're back to Abraham Lincoln. You cannot go fight these things. It's not worth it. And there's a different way to fight it. And my other premise is I'm a huge fan of Sun Tzu. I would have to be. I've read all the military stuff that you can read. And, the skillful general wins the battle without firing a single shot. And that is the most fun. And that's actually what I enjoy doing the most. We can win this, and people will smile in the process. What's the Winston Churchill quote about telling people to go to hell and they're happy to ask for directions, right? I mean, that is where we actually should be here.
Yeah.
In this discussion and how Tesla handles this, because they are so competent. The bar has been advanced so far that actually Elon is using this to his advantage. He knows how slow the government is to mobilize. So maybe we should go back to this risk piece. I don't think that they're at risk. We've got a new Congress, Republicans. We've already touched on this. They've got the House. And they're already coming to Elon's defense in terms of free speech and equal access.
Should we go ahead and play one of those clips real quick, Ron? Because maybe for those that haven't watched it. So go ahead and producer wife, pull up the let's do the Ron DeSantis 1 second. So let's do who was the other gentleman? that made the comment?
McCarthy.
McCarthy. Yeah. So let's go ahead and play this one first, and then
Kevin
we'll play
McCarthy.
Ron DeSantis. Yeah, go for it.
That is offensive to me. Government's going to go after someone who wants to have free speech. What do they have to look at Twitter about? Do they want to go more after American public about whether they can have an opinion on something? I think the American public have spoken on this. I think our First Amendment stands up, and I think they should stop picking on Elon Musk. You know, Elon Musk has succeeded in many places. I'd bet on him more than government going after you. And one thing I would say when we talk about accountability, we'll no longer let government go after people simply because of their political views.
So this is in response to a question around Twitter being looked into by the government. And then if you play the other clip as well, producer wife, this is by Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, probably running for president in 2024. Hasn't officially announced, but I mean, it's basically guaranteed. So let's go ahead and play that one as well.
And twice or three times now supported by Elon.
That's correct. That's correct. Let's go ahead and play that.
Very concerning. And then when you also hear reports that Apple is threatening to remove Twitter from the App Store because Elon Musk is actually opening it up for free speech and is restoring a lot of accounts that were unfairly and illegitimately suspended for putting out accurate information about COVID. That's like one of the main things that's being reinstated. So many things these experts were wrong at, and you had people on Twitter that were calling that out. And Twitter, the old regime in Twitter, their response was to try to just suffocate the dissent. And Elon Musk knows that's not a winning formula, and so he's providing free speech. And so if Apple responds to that by nuking them from the App Store, you know, I think that would be a huge, huge mistake. And it would be a really raw exercise of monopolistic power that I think would merit a response from the United States Congress. And so don't be a vassal of the CCP on one hand, and then use your corporate power in the United States on the other to suffocate Americans and try to suppress their right to express themselves.
Thank you very much. So, and what goes through my mind when I hear those statements is like, okay, so one of the risk factors in my head was government, but there is obvious support for him either because his donations are working or it's because they actually are, quote unquote, say inspired by what he's doing. There's clear support. So what kind of goes through your mind when you hear those statements? Who wants to take it first?
Well, the first thing I want to point out before Ron probably gets into it, and this is something Ron pointed out, Tesla is not lobbying a lot, right? Ron, you remember those numbers you gave to me? I then compared them.
It's
it was like
$500,000
exactly $500,000 of lobbying last year by Tesla to any party, while Ford is 10 times that, GM is 20 times that. So we're not at all, a big league lobbying partner, at least in 2021. I don't know what's happening in 2022. And I'm not saying Tesla has to lobby, but one thing that's for sure is they are not or they have not been lobbying, so they were not buying an influence so far. Now, the other thing that's actually very positive is the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, we all know what's coming out in January is highly beneficial to Tesla. Nobody will benefit as much of it as Tesla. They probably didn't put it in place for Tesla. They probably did it to save GM and Ford, but it's just blatantly evident that Tesla is going to benefit much more. And there was a short tweet at one moment where Elon personally thanked what's the West Virginia senator?
Manchin,
exactly.
Yep.
Manchin, because obviously that was the thing that made it happen. So there was some discussion at one point. There is no doubt. I mean, I just don't believe Elon would do a tweet saying, thank you, Manchin, we had this, if there wouldn't have been any prior discussions or exchanges to make this happen. So for a long time, I was, concerned about government trying to stop whatever venture came. I then understood actually Elon's ventures are so much ahead that there is no legislation in place yet. That doesn't mean it can't come, but it is more difficult to come now that Congress is divided. So I think he actually had just gained another 2 years of progress in his craziest moves, right? FSD, Neuralink, whatever, just because he will have less of the headwind. They can talk, but they can't do much. A senator can't do much at the moment if they don't have the House, right? That's just it.
That's correct. But they can make your life miserable. And
Sure.
it's like falling into a nest of fire ants, right? For most people, it's not going to kill you, but they can make life pretty miserable. I think an example that I, have rolled around in my own head as part of the danger, or something that a way to characterize it is in with imperialist Japan heading into World War II. Through the 20s and certainly in the 30s, when they had more expansionist ideas, they started, frothing around in the Orient and causing a lot of trouble. And the government kept trying, the U.S. government kept trying to swat them away and, put some boundaries in place in terms of energy and other things like that. So we all know about that. It wasn't an issue. It was uncomfortable for Japan. It didn't become an issue until they actually attacked Pearl Harbor. And what happened then is the government was provoked sufficiently, or felt threat that was sufficient, that it decided to mobilize. Now, it took a period of time for them to mobilize. But once they do, it is unstoppable. And that's what you don't want to happen in Elon's case, where he essentially gets the government to mobilize against him. I'm certain that he has gamed the government against itself, because he knows he can innovate and iterate so quickly that the government doesn't have time to mobilize. He's already moved on beyond the problem. So, like, for instance, on FSD is improving so quickly that by the time they would get around to congressional hearings, much less issue charges of criminality against Tesla or what have you, they would be able to come out and say, well, that was 3 iterations ago of the software. Here's the data to support it. And so there's not a problem to discuss here. We're already past the problem. And I know that he's gaming the government in every situation with that. So there's no question about that. So protections for Elon right now, why I don't think they're at huge government risk, is that we've got a new Congress and it's divided. We've already touched on that. You will not see more robust public statements or support. That was McCarthy's statement as a gentleman who'll be the next speaker in a few weeks. That was not just an affirmation. That was combative affirmation, right? That was combative.
Oh yeah, they have selected their camp. There's no doubt about it.
And as a speaker, I can guarantee you, with that sort of public statement, there is no chance in hell that there will be any sort of House action against the company, unless there is some black swan event that turns up, or Elon were to sufficiently shoot himself in the foot. Then that would that would change the landscape. But that would be difficult to walk back with that powerful of a statement. When you look at the individual members, you've already touched on this, whether you're a senator or you're in the House, they simply don't have that much leverage right now. Markey has been around for a long time. He knows every center of power in the government. He and the president are very well connected as Northeastern Democrats, et cetera. And they are of that dying breed of politician who are labor. Their political base is essentially union labor. So they don't have much leverage. They've got limited willpower now to engage this, and they've got bigger fish to fry, quite frankly. If you're going to talk about tech regulation or existential threats, TikTok is far more of an issue right now, because you've got issues with China on that and national security. Actually, the algorithms they use and how that's affecting kids. The videos that are fed to Chinese children promote certain levels of enhancement, where everything that is fed to Western children or audiences is to degrade the mind and divide families and things like that. And it's pretty astonishing when you actually dig into the algorithms and what that output is. So that's
and if you think about it, how long it, excuse me to interrupt you, Ron, and how long it takes Congress to finally act. I mean,
that's right.
We've been talking about TikTok being an issue since 2019. We're 2022 at the end, 3 years later, and they still haven't done anything. And yet Apple thinks they're smart in blowing up I don't know what against Twitter. I mean, this is completely ridiculous.
So other tech issues, you've got Snapchat, Instagram, which is tied in with crime, fentanyl, all of those issues. And these are much more present and much larger issues for Congress. And no disrespect to Tesla, but it's tiny compared to those other platforms. You know,
thank heaven,
about, a quarter of a billion, a quarter of a billion to a third of a billion user base, whereas you're talking billions of user base with these other platforms. So they don't see the same type of threat or need to address it. It's simply too small. Now, we have a pretty good idea, at least I think I do, if I'm seeing around corners correctly, that Twitter can probably expand into a near billion or 1.5 billion user base within, relatively quickly, over a couple of years. And I think that's likely to happen. But today it's 250 million, 300 million users, and it simply doesn't come up on the radar the same way these other concerns do. The danger here is with the government, they have the luxury of time, they have deep pockets, and they make the rules. And it doesn't matter even if they make the rules, they decide how they get enforced or even if they get enforced. And the southern border is a perfect example. We've got every rule under the sun down there to protect the border, requirements for immigration, all the rest of it. And this administration simply chooses to ignore that. And I'm talking empirically, we look at that. We know 2 million people are coming across the border this year. If you compare that to the statutes, there's no way that should happen. It's just, a dear friend of mine used to run CBP. I used to work side by side with that guy. So I know a little bit about this, and there's no way 2 million people should be coming essentially unimpeded across the border. That shouldn't happen. So the rules are there. They're not being enforced.
Yeah. Let me do maybe a little bit of a role-playing exercise, because where my head is at, based on the discussion. By the way, thank you both so much for being so open and valuable. We've been at it for an hour already, and there's still so much to talk about, which is fascinating. If you're enjoying the content so far, make sure you throw us a like. But look at that producer wife's on. My God, she's the best.
She's the brains of the operation.
She is. There's no brains in here. I'll tell you that much. I'm an empty vessel. It's so true. Thank you, baby. The role-playing exercise here is, okay, so if Elon or whatever the sphere of power that Elon and his companies have, as long as there's nothing egregious that happens in the, say, near to medium term, it seems like as long as they execute at the level that they can, this will turn into something that is going to be a giant behemoth that is essentially unstoppable as long as nothing gets in the way. So the role-playing exercise is, what could happen that would derail this situation? If we're going to put it within this, the context of, hey, Elon says something or does something, or what's the incentive for others to actually want to bury him or his companies? How do you guys think about that?
I mean, obviously, I have no idea how outrageous it would have to be, but don't underestimate. Yes, government is slow, and at the moment it's now divided. So I think we can sort of put down that risk into the, 20% range, right? This is not a fiery risk anymore because of the midterms and because we now have outspoken support. But don't underestimate the media. Now, the thing is, if we all understand that the media is making much more noise than necessary, because first of all, it sells, and second, Elon is just a perfect target for them, right? He incorporates everything they hate, everything. Right? Billionaire, outspoken, having a following better than theirs, talking against them. I mean, so media will always amplify anything bad about Elon's company that they can. They have done for a long time, but it will get worse. Mm-hmm. So the question is actually, how do we react? Now, one is us as shareholders. Do we get impressed by that? Do we get discouraged by that? But also us as members of social media. Can we fight better back? Can we smoothen out whatever comes from their side? And up to what level can we help? And again, I just want to make sure, because I saw one of those comments in the box, people saying, "Oh, let Elon be Elon." I think we all three agree we want to let Elon be Elon. We just want to make sure that he puts people in place a little bit behind the scenes that smoothen out what needs to be smoothened out. That there is more of a communication to the people that are not communicated to at the moment, and that there is something more publicly available on the facts, right? That we're not just talking about the last tweet 5 minutes ago, but that we're more understanding about the advancements of Tesla, the advancements of Twitter, the advancements of SpaceX, but more on a factual basis. And this is actually low-hanging fruit, Faz, that we've been discussing for the last at least 6 months, that this whole communication thing is now overdue. It's really absolutely important that there comes some independent communication from the different entities, just because at the moment Elon is perceived as being the only spokesperson for everything from his Diet Coke night table to SpaceX just launching the last rocket, right? Anything in between.
Neuralink.
And that this has
everything.
to be a little bit, exactly, Neuralink today, the semi tomorrow, that this has to be a little bit more organized and communicated in a smoother manner.
Wrong
But
way.
I don't know, what could be a black
sorry.
swan event? I'm sorry, I
Well,
derived from that.
I would agree with that. If we roll the clock back just a few weeks, if we had this conversation 2 months ago, Kanye West would still have all of his sponsorships and would still be free to retain a very large following.
Kanye who?
Kanye West.
I'm kidding.
Yes.
But you see how quickly he killed, how quickly he killed his legacy?
He killed himself. And, I don't know Kanye. I've not spent any time with him. I don't expect I would. I'm not advocating for or against him. I'm just saying, this gets back to my dad's lesson: don't be your own worst enemy, right? We all have to learn how to not kill ourselves. And that's a little bit of the danger here. I mean, and I'm not passing judgment on Elon and what he does with his family or his children or whatever, but when you start having children from multiple women in what appear to be less than stable circumstances that might breach ethical concerns within your company because one happens to be an employee. I don't know all the social dynamics of that, of what agreements he's got to, with these partners, what the arrangements are to raise his family. But I just know that in normal consciousness, that spooks people. They don't get that. And, Kanye made some social commentary against certain ethnic groups, and he has been canceled. I mean, just outright. Instantly, you're no longer a billionaire. Matter of fact, you're barely 100 millionaire. And I mean, it's rapid. And, Trump, again, not advocating for or against, simply talking about the facts. You're talking about a lifetime of brand building, and he will never regain the luster of the Trump brand. It will never happen. It's not even a remote possibility.
And it's actually coming to Trump, which is not really bring something to this discussion, but it's actually killed the brand for his children, right? I mean, that's how deep it goes when you ruin a brand. I disagree slightly with you, Ron, on Elon's private life. I mean, I don't mind. Maybe it's because I have children from different husbands, but I don't mind that he has children from all corners. But I'm happy that his DNA gets spread as much as it can, because the more intelligent people we have in this world, better it is. And I don't give him any grievance for having a non-traditional family life or whatever. And I don't think actually our interest in him should go that far. I'm always very careful in not commenting on any of his personal stuff. Where I just want to make sure people understand we are actually, us retail investors, and probably not only the 4 of us or the hundreds of us that are in the stream, but we as retail investors, we are the biggest shareholders in Tesla, right? And some of us may even have SpaceX shares, and some of us may even have Twitter shares. But those that are in SpaceX and in Twitter are usually wealthy enough to to understand the risks they're taking with their investments. We are the only ones in Tesla having really publicly available share that anybody can purchase. Some people are further down the retirement road, others are still very young and have a lot of time. But the one thing I just would like to see is that there is some consciousness at the level of Tesla, maybe even at the level of Elon, that not every battle is worth fighting if it harms the Tesla shareholder. We are the majority of the Tesla shareholders, us retail investors. There are currently less institutional investors in there than retail investors. And some stuff just gets to us and we are collateral damage of something we have nothing to do with. And
Absolutely.
how can we help soften this out a little bit? That's really my angle.
You bet. What Elon does, what he does in his personal life, that his decisions, obviously, I don't have any idea what those arrangements are. All the evidence is that with his ex-wives, that he's been very generous with them, continues to have excellent relationships with them. So I'm not making any commentary of whether that's right or wrong or whatever. I'm just saying for a lot of people who are looking for any reason to ding you and start trying to paint you as a mad genius or somebody. I mean, you know, Kanye got canceled overnight, and you can't. It starts moving into a dicey area that you simply didn't have to move into or open up for scrutiny, is what I'm saying. And I think you're saying a little bit of the same thing. What was the second part of your question?
Well, we were thinking, you know, what would be a black swan event that would then really harm Tesla shareholders?
You know, one thing I've been disturbed by a little bit with Elon is his insistence that he doesn't care about share price and that other people shouldn't be concerned about share price, and the share price is too high. A few years ago, there was a huge debate with, say, professional athletes, particularly NBA stars, what have you. And there was a hue and cry over whether or not they were role models, the effect they were having on kids. And a lot of kids were modeling bad behavior from pro athletes. And, you know, Charles Barkley spoke up at one point, got very frustrated in an interview and lashed out and said, I'm nobody's role model. I didn't ask to be a role model, and, you know, don't hold me to that standard. I'm not responsible for what some kid does. And that's just simply not true. It comes with the territory, whether you like it or not. And if you don't want that level of scrutiny, then you shouldn't be in the business. You shouldn't be, you should get out of the business.
You're completely spot on.
And
you're completely spot on. And yeah,
in my religious, my religious upbringing, it's you're not allowed to be an impediment to other people. You can't be a stumbling block to others. And so I think to have such callous disregard for some random statement I have will affect millions, and to say that you don't have any responsibility on that, I don't agree with that. I think that should be handled with a little bit more care. So that would be my general statement there, without being overly critical. So
no, I completely agree, and I think I've brought this up earlier. I would have wished the last couple of days, short weeks, some statement on, I'm done selling Tesla for Twitter. It's just something that recognizes that, the Tesla shareholder backholders here have been gone through quite a lot. None of our doings, our actions, and just recognizing the fact, and there haven't been, and I do understand, there's probably completely other priorities at the moment, but it would be nice. It comes back to my blue, red, yellow, green boxes. I think when you're deep into this engineering stuff, you see Tesla in the next 5 to 10 years being double the size of Apple, double the size of Aramco. You're just, what the heck, these shareholders, you just hold, you're good. I understand, but just a little bit of love and care, tender love and care would always come a little bit, welcoming and help smoothing out so many people who have pain.
You don't even, truthfully, at this point, you don't even need a statement. You just need Elon to go dark and let it be mysterious, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I grew up with Democrats holding Congress for 40 years, right? And a teenager, somebody coming of age and who pays attention to these things, I used to just if Republicans can only get both houses, the universe will be right, right? All things will be corrected. And I'll be damned if the Republicans didn't get it. And they did the same thing the Democrats did. They Christmas treed the budget. They had special projects. They got in trouble. It was, and so I still think that government is a great place to get things done. It should be there to get things done. By the same token, in many respects, I want a deadlocked Congress now. Even in the imperfection of what we have on the landscape out there that you have to deal in terms of regulation, all the rest of it, we know how much better it could be and should be, and what that possibility is. I want it to be deadlocked as much as.
Isn't that crazy that we arrived there? Because we probably all agree on that.
It's like a cancer. It's like a cancer patient. I can deal with what I know. I can't deal with what I don't know.
Yeah.
And if you're going to change the rules,
they can go so bizarre on both sides that you rather not have it, right?
So as long as they just stop in place, or they've got gridlock, then everyone can adjust and they can come up with a winning formula for that, right? You can figure out how to create a winning scenario for yourself, whether you're in finance or you're running a small business or whatever it is. You can figure that out. But the problem is when the ball's always moving, the regulations change, they change the rules. That's exhausting. It creates huge inefficiencies out there for people, and it's not fair. It's not right. I just rather be deadlocked as much as anything, so that you can actually make a stable plan in light of whatever that bad circumstance is. You know, you've got children in the Philippines who grew up in landfills. And they end up actually having, they can make a pretty good life even within the landfill, because they, that's what they know, and they learn how to survive there. If you can survive in a landfill like that as a child, then you can survive anything, right? But if someone's constantly changing that landscape, then you've got no chance.
Have to adapt.
Yeah,
I agree. Now, I want to bring this to a last subject that was important for me, and I'm not saying we're closing this up, but one subject I wanted to bring in is the bots, right? The bots is obviously, thank you for wearing the t-shirt, Farzad. This was not coordinated.
Merch store on my description below. Support the channel.
There you go. Now I can plug his store.
Thank you.
So the bots are coming, and I hear nobody express yet concerns that the unions are going to go ballistic. This is the biggest threat to social disruption. I think this is a bigger threat to social disruption than cars, right? Because it will just completely change labor. It will be the way we Elon touched on having an universal income then for everybody. And that's where politics, in my view, will get much more involved, right? It's a one thing that there will be some self-driving cars. There's another thing that maybe Twitter gets more of a free speech platform or not, we will see. But once we will really have millions and millions of bots replacing workers that currently pay union fees, workers that vote. I see all the benefits of the bots, and I've written about it already a couple of times. I see that actually our quality of life will improve. But that's me, right? This is not the blue collar average car worker or whatever else, or even agricultural worker or whatever. And do you see, because obviously there is currently no ministry of bots, right? There's, government is not prepared to this disruption. I don't even know who it would be. It's not going to be Department of Labor, right?
Yeah.
Does the government have to be prepared? Is this simply Adam Smith, right? The invisible hand working, where markets take care? Some of this stuff just takes care of itself, right? There's a natural transition, and because you're talking market efficiency and all of those things, right? Does the government have to get involved? So, for instance, Tennessee has a huge piece of its economy is automotive manufacturing, and that entire umbrella, right? Nissan is, VW's got a huge facility down in Chattanooga. You got Nissan south of Nashville. GM is making vehicles in Spring Hill. And that's before you get into all of the, the other smaller suppliers and things like that under that umbrella. But Tennessee's a right to work state. That business from GM and other manufacturers have gravitated south. Like you've got a huge operation from Toyota in Kentucky and BMW in South Carolina. That list goes on. And business naturally gravitates here or to these places specifically because they're less regulated and because they are right to work states. And so, people are free to vote. They have regular votes on whether you're going to unionize, and those votes are constantly rejected by the workers. That's the market at work. The government can't force it, shouldn't force it. So I see that as being less of an issue. My concern, go ahead, Farzan.
No, I was going to say, like, I actually view it as an issue, but differently. So I think there will be, I'm warming up to the fact that, quote unquote, the invisible hand, or say the human spirit, will figure out how to bring value in an automated world. Like, we'll find things that we find valuable, and there'll be markets that are created. But the biggest risk I see during this time is that it's going to be so easy to label Elon as the he's taking away your jobs guy. It's going to be incredibly easy, and it's going to start with full self-driving. You're going to put taxi workers out of work. You're going to put truck drivers out of work, and that in itself is going to be a giant working base of the United States and other countries. And governmental officials and political parties are going to just flock to that so fast and so quick, and they're going to peg this guy as he is literally killing your livelihood. He is literally killing your livelihood, and there is a very large chance that that's the opposite, that it's going to enable people to truly follow their passions. And it's going to really open up our economy to the next generation. But it's going to be so hard to see that, especially when we're going to have a transition that's likely to be a complete shit show, because it's going to require a lot of governmental really input to ensure that society doesn't collapse through that. And because they're so freaking slow, what's probably going to happen is there's going to be a giant gap of work, right? I mean, this is like, I feel like this is a very logical thing that's going to happen. That is where my fear goes to. Is that's where Elon is super, super, super easy to target. Yeah.
I agree with you. And then add to that the military. Just think about it. If suddenly the military would be more bots than soldiers, right? I mean, you know that subject obviously much better than me, Ron, but that's where government has its role. Do you maintain these, I don't know, millions of soldiers in the US, or then do you replace them with bots? I mean, there's so much to it.
Well, and government's threatened in terms of its revenue model, right?
Sure.
You're talking about income taxes, payroll taxes. If those workers are bots, right?
That's exactly it. Where is it going?
Where do those payroll taxes come from? Because you're not paying for the, right? So,
but and even the contrary, then suddenly you have to pay this universal income to people that, where does it come from, right?
Right. Yeah. So the government is going to kick the can down the road, which is what they always do. They're going to put it off as long as possible until it becomes a real threat. And so you're starting to see that in terms of instead of gas taxes collected at the pump, right? Electric vehicles don't use. So now we're going to tax the electricity at the charging source. We're going to have a use tax based on mileage, where we track your mileage every year and you pay that fee. And I tell you what's going to happen is, in all likelihood, you'll end up with a patchwork because of the political landscape. Every state, every locality, municipality, they get a lot of choice. We like to defer locally in most instances, which is why we're frothy on the abortion issue, right? Supreme Court didn't outlaw abortion; they pushed it back to the states to deal with it, and
another mess is there.
Yeah. So, and that's what will happen here. There, one state will say, well, this is what it means to be an electric autonomous taxi cab versus another state, and how that gets taxed or certified or whatever. And then the question will be, well, is this sufficient enough for the federal government to step in and provide a universal solution? Does that make more sense? And that could be a long time coming, but all of the funding resources for the government are now at threat because most of it is on an income tax. I've always been an advocate for consumption taxes because a consumption tax is much more in line with it matches our economic system most appropriately, and it gives people choice over their taxation. If you choose not to spend and you want to save your wealth into prosperity, you can do that. You have that opportunity. I also think it's against the Constitution. The Constitution says you can't have a head tax. There's a direct tax on people and what you produce or whatever. So I get that. I think it's far more beneficial that if you're going to consume more, and we're focused as a consumption society, that if you're going to consume more of the world's resources and things like that, maybe you should pay a little higher tax for that, which you're going to pay simply in a sales tax or whatever, because you consume more. I also like the mechanism of it, because it's, almost every state has a mechanism to collect it at the point of sale. You don't have to go through all the tax receipts and accountants and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really straightforward, and it takes administrative burden. You get a lot of social good by having that system. But all of the traditional funding mechanisms for, every form of transportation, how you fuel, registrations, all the rest of it, all of that is up in the air. And I don't think you can expect to see any sort of a universal answer anytime soon.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, I think we made the point a couple of times, but maybe people just joined us now, and I want to come to a conclusion on that. The one thing that's clear is Elon is always ahead of the curve, right? Mm-hmm. By being ahead of the curve, governments and all the agencies that need or think they need to regulate it will always be late. Mm-hmm. And so while we see sometimes now for FSD and certainly for bots and all that, actually no roadblocks, there may be roadblocks just in the making, because mm-hmm. government only understands now what's all implied and what, where they want to put their hand on it. They're not doing roadblocks to protect us. Let's face it. They're putting roadblocks so that they have their influence and their share of voice in this whole thing. So he's ahead of the curve. He's playing from all sides, no doubt about it. He is very personal. We see him on Twitter all the time. We don't want to change that, but we just want to make sure that the companies he has in place, and especially the ones we're all invested in, have their share of voice to be heard as well, and not only have him as the only, spokesperson in there, and that he understands he needs to surround himself with a couple of people that help him smoothen this out, because he has great goals. We all adhere to them, but he will need these other actors to understand where he's going and to conform with it.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the most interesting thing here for me is that, Elon talks about attack vectors. He's talked about them before, right? Like mm-hmm. there's all these attack vectors for me. It's, I'm a billionaire, right? I am a capitalist, whatever you want to call. I'm a white male. Like there's, depending on who the subgroup is, there's always going to be an attack vector.
An emerald
mine. Yeah. Like, he's got all the money in the world and the entire family is phony and all this stuff, right? Like, and it's obvious that he comes from a good family. Shout out to Musk for having 3 incredible children, FYI. I don't think she gets enough credit. Like, it's mind blowing. But if she watches this, dude, like you're like queen. Anyway, mm-hmm. But what's interesting here is the mitigation of risk becomes a legitimate thing that should be thought about as a leader as you move into these uncertain times, especially knowing how ineffective and potentially disruptive government can be and other forces as you're innovating on these things, and the bigger you get, And so what goes through my mind is, in the next 3 to 5 years, if Tesla achieves their goals, if SpaceX achieves their goals, if Twitter achieves their goals, Elon will probably be the first trillionaire ever.
Right.
Ever, right? Think about that attack vector, right? So that is a gigantic attack vector. So if within the risk mitigation sort of thing that we're talking about here, I feel like it makes so much sense to invest time and effort and resources and delegation to ensure that no additional risks appear as the line that he's riding, that sort of exponential curve, undoubtedly reaches the end goal, because it's going to get weird. It's going to get really, really weird.
And it's actually not even as a defense, just to be heard the right way, right? It's not about, because there will be stuff that is criticizable. There is no doubt about it. But at the moment, he actually gets so much more attention on things that he shouldn't even be criticized about, because they're wrong. They're just plain out wrong. So instead of defending or having to let die those stuff, just making sure that he's heard on the level that deserves to be heard, right? That there is an explanation to what he does to the other groups of this society who don't understand this engineering talk and this where in all different.
They don't care.
Because
They just want it
They
to
don't
work.
care. They don't have the time to spend on it. They don't have the attention span to concentrate on it, but yet they deserve to hear it, and it will actually help his whole endeavors. More there is sunshine on what he's doing, more there is a clear understanding of what he wants to do, less he's actually attackable, but it has to be a purposeful, direct measure by him. He has to, build this team up that helps him defend the mission, defend his statements, and let's just actually put this back into current times. He will publish in the next hours or days what he found in the Twitter cupboards, right? I mean, this is going to be huge, because we all know this is the same crap that they did to Facebook and everybody else. And everybody, exactly, and everybody's just keeping shut. But this is going to be huge. Yeah. Worldwide news, and they are preparing. And the mistake he made, I find, but I mean, who am I? 2 days ago, he put out, "Yes, I will publish this." Why do you do that? Why do you tell your opponents you're going in a couple of days to war? Now your opponents have days to prepare. How dumb is that? Just wait until you have it and throw it out. Then they're taken by surprise. Now they're all sitting here discussing, okay, this will come.
They're
what's
preparing.
Our defense?
And they're professional hit artists. That's what they do. That is the
and they have the whole media with them, right?
That's right.
And so this will be this
well,
could
this
have
is
been done.
This is what hasn't happened. And I'll date myself with this. There's an old movie called War Games with Matthew Broderick that you guys may remember from like 1983 or something like that. And he's a young teenage hacker, and he hacks in.
Were you born, Father?
Nope.
Yeah, and he hacks in, or maybe it's a little bit later than that, late 80s. Maybe you were a toddler. I don't know. But anyway, he's a super bright kid who is into computers, and he manages to hack into, he thinks he's hacking into a game company, but he actually hacks into a DoD site. And he starts playing games with this supercomputer that they have put in place that can take control of ballistic launches and things like that, right? It's to help them do war game scenarios and play it out and what have you. And what happens is one of the game options, so that all the strategy games are listed. And one of the games is Global Thermonuclear War. And he initiates the game, and unwittingly the computer takes over, and the world is on its way to annihilation because they can't get the computer to stop running the simulation. And when they try to stop it, the computer shuts them out and just takes over to come up with the launch codes on its own and what have you. Well, the kid manages to find the mad scientist who created this computer, which is called the Whopper, the War Operations, whatever. And as the computer is about to launch missiles, they pull up the strategy list. And the one strategy game, the most basic one of all, is not listed. It's tic-tac-toe. And they initiate tic-tac-toe, and the computer runs tic-tac-toe in every simulation. And then it proceeds to run every nuclear possibility that there is, right? And so they've got big screens, and it's a big light show in the whole 9 yards. Well, to cut to the chase, the computer figures out that the only winning move is not to play. And that is, I understand Elon's ethos that even if you lose, some things you engage just because it's the right thing to do. But he hasn't learned, I don't think, in my estimation, I say this very respectfully to the world's wealthiest man and probably the most influential person on the planet now, is that sometimes the only winning move or the best move is simply not to play, not to get drawn into these petty disagreements, and to fight it a different way, or to let people fight it on your behalf. Because at the end of the day, we know that he's going to do the right thing. We know the technical brilliance and the good to humanity that's going to be done. I would like to see a pivot the way Nike pivoted or the way Apple pivoted. You know, Steve Jobs is very, very instructive, I think. You have two distinct Steve Jobses. You have 1.0 version and 2.0 version. And in between, you had a period, a decade, where he essentially was in purgatory, right? Got kicked out of his own company. He was difficult to work with. He was petulant. He was outrageous. And he created a lot of froth. He fought with Microsoft. He fought with IBM. There was a lot of negative messaging out there, and it caused a lot of issues. he didn't learn until he formed Next. He still had, even though it was a superior software and all the rest of it, he still had issues there to get traction. It wasn't until he bought Pixar and he got another shot at Apple a decade later that he had figured out how to be comfortable within himself to still be the difficult, mad genius, the innovator who has to break things in order to dent the universe and move the needle. He still understood he had to play nice with people. He couldn't do it alone. He needed the street. So he went to great lengths to calm the froth when he had the famous Macworld's speech where they brought in Bill Gates. Hey, we've partnered with them. We're not going to feud with them anymore. And not only that, we're taking some of their money. They're investing in the company. They're going to guarantee these products are in place for at least 3 years, for the Office suite. And that was nothing but a screaming statement on stability and playing a little nicer with others. Elon needs to do that. Nike focuses on the product. Apple's first ad campaign after Steve Jobs returned was Think Different. And they pivoted and said, look, Nike doesn't focus on the product. They help unlock people's personal potential in their performance athletically, right? They show you great athletes so that you can aspire to be as great as you can be using our products at the same time. Apple did exactly that. They quit focusing on the box and the megahertz speed and how much RAM and all of the tech stuff. And they simply turned it into, you can be a great artist like Picasso or whomever and change your world or influence a larger audience. They focused on the tools. Elon has that same opportunity now, particularly if he will let surrogates help carry that message and humanize it and connect with a smile in a good way to show how a driverless car is going to make your life better. I don't own a Tesla currently. I've got a reservation for both a Cybertruck as well as an Aptera. And but I have very much of a concern on privacy and government intervention. And granted, they've been able to do this for a long time. OnStar, you could unlock the car, turn the car off from a distance. You've been able to do that for 20 years. I get it, but this mandate that you've got to have kill switches on cars, we're seeing, that bothers me. It bothers me a lot. The converse to that with FSD, at some point, I may not be able to drive myself to the hospital in an emergency, and the car can drive me, and I can actually get care that I might not otherwise be able to get. And that is a compelling argument. And we need to have positive, uplifting, compelling arguments to everyday people or other decision makers, whether you're, wouldn't it be great for Dan Ives to have some comfort when he's doing his reporting to say, this is really how Tesla is going to improve people's lives.
Completely agree.
That would
completely
be great. And that's the fun part for somebody like me, or maybe Farzad or you, Alexandra, for this panel, we love to make that connection, and we can do it with a smile on our face and help people feel uplifted and not threatened by it and see the benefit.
I completely agree. And one of the things I say to a lot of parents, because obviously with 5 children, I meet a lot of other parents. I said, the Tesla is the safest car. I don't let my children drive anything else because I want my children to survive.
Hands down.
This is something you hear nowhere. Why not, right?
That's right.
Why can we not convince parents easily to give their 16 to 25-year-old kids rather a Tesla than anything else because they get back home? And I just think there is something missing emotionally or whatever. And it's not Elon only, of course not, but it's just the whole Tesla communication that is just missing a little bit of heart and compassion.
I mean,
well, the other part of that. Go ahead, Farzad.
No, I was just going to make a point, I think he's just built the ultimate INTJ company, and it has inspired a lot of other INTJs, and it's brought him so far. And he's like, dude, this is obviously working. So why should I worry about this stuff, right?
Because there are 93% other people out there.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah, go ahead, Ron. Sorry.
We're back to Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Early criticism from Jobs that continued was, hey, you're running a tech company, but you hire all of these liberal arts people. Why are you doing that? And Steve, famously drew the graph and said, if you plot the life experience of most engineers, it's very linear. It's not very deep. So there's far less creativity. There's far less life experience. And it's such a homogenized experience that I can't possibly connect with other people. I can't come up with better answers, right? So I'm given to understand that maybe they're looking for a person to help with some of this messaging or whatever, without going the traditional K Street lobbyist, the slick interaction, but they want to hire another engineer. And that is absolutely the wrong thing. They need to hire somebody who has a much more varied background, who can connect with people and sell the message essentially on a retail level and comfort people and make it a positive. That's what they need. And it's probably a rare skill set.
So Alexandra.
Somebody, yeah. So, well, actually, it would probably be
nothing else to do in my life.
Well, it's probably any of the three of us, right? And I'm not advocating for myself. I'm just using an example. I've been turning wrenches my whole life. I love to be essentially a gym rat, and working out or turning wrenches or whatever. I've got a Mercedes. I've taken the thing completely apart. I can show you the pictures where there's no front end on it and the back end is out of it because I rebuilt the car myself. But to do the politics, to understand the musical piece that we talked about before, that's another language, and being able to talk multiple languages is very helpful, to connect with it, because it's all about connection, and you have to enjoy making that connection. And it's very easy. I had some debate over, like with the kids going, well, they're not going to be a music major. Why should they be playing music? Well, because it wires your brain differently. You can do math better. You connect with people better. There doesn't have to be this direct payoff in the paycheck or whatever. There is a benefit that goes beyond that is extremely beneficial. It's not just 2 + 2 = 4. Sometimes 2 + 2 equals something far greater than that.
It's a very human thing.
Yeah.
Right. It's distinctly human. Yeah.
And as you said, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I used to have young Marines. So there's this thing in the Marine Corps. You're an officer, you're enlisted, and if you were a young Marine and enlisted, and you transition into the officer corps, right? You've been highlighted for special skill or whatever. Those people are termed Mustangs, and it's actually kind of a badge of honor. And I've been asked, I wasn't a Mustang. I came in the regular officer path and did all of that. But a highlight of 28 years in the Marine Corps was to be asked when I'm senior, hey, sir, can I ask you a question? Sure, Marine, what's on your mind? Sir, are you a Mustang? I said, I'll answer your question, but can you tell me why you're asking? Sir, you actually talk to us. You listen to us. Right? And that is the difference. I think if you get one-on-one with Elon, it doesn't matter that he's the world's wealthiest person. You would connect with him on a one-on-one basis, right? And I think you can see that in the faces of his tribe with these programmers and things like that. But he's only one person. He can only do so much of that. And he's probably only going to be so comfortable in so many different audiences doing that. I think any of the three of us could probably walk into any audience, whether it's walking on the shop floor or any level in between, all the way up to the C-suite or in a political office or whatever. I love the ability to be able to go from the janitor to the CEO and have an equally warm and effective relationship with every single person in that chain. That is a great thrill to me. And I also think it's an obligation, if you're a leader, to be able to do that. You have an obligation to connect.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
I want to add to that. Yeah, I want to add to that I looked, it's been a couple of months now, but I watched those Third Row podcasts. I don't remember how the name was, that they did 3-4 years ago with Kirsten.
Oh yeah, K10 and all those folks. Yeah,
exactly, and Omar and all that. And I have to say, most of these young people were engineers, right? Most of these people were done computer science or other things. So here I come. I'm not, right? I'm a BA in business, and all I've done in my life is business. I've got some good financial knowledge, but I have no engineering knowledge whatsoever. I had to watch these couple of times, and even after a couple of times, I still didn't understand everything, right? And this was 3-4 years ago. This was in a period Tesla was out of the biggest mess, but still not profitable and whatever. And so we should just acknowledge that there is and I don't particularly think I'm dumb or whatever, but there's a huge majority of people that can't hear, even if they put a lot of effort and attention to it, that can't hear what Elon is saying, or even partially only can hear it. And that doesn't mean it's the mistake of Elon. It just means he is not the only person that has to communicate to these people about the process of his endeavors. And to his credit, what he's doing business-wise with Twitter is exactly what needed to be done. He needed to weed out all the artists of Twitter, because now at the moment the problem is engineering. At the moment is the product has to become better before you can put the fluffy things around it again to make it more of a. But please don't forget to put the fluffy things back into place as well, because and it's not just a matter of re-employing thousands of people. That's not what I'm talking about. But Twitter has to also be something else than just an engineering prowess again, especially Twitter. Probably of all his products, it is the one that needs the most social skills.
Yes.
What I find so fascinating, and maybe what we'll do we have another 15 minutes from y'all? You guys comfortable with another 15?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll do a Q&A, maybe like a Q&A section where in the comments, if you want to ask a question, put question before your comment, and then we'll have producer wife pick out only the best ones. Well, she'll bring up as many as she can.
She has the power. Power to Cindy.
She has the power. She can shut this whole thing right now if she wanted to. She has so much power.
Don't do it.
No, don't do it, please. What I find extremely fascinating, I think this was in the All In podcast where Elon went on with the guys. If you're not familiar with All In, it's basically these very successful billionaire folks that openly talk about their thoughts and how they see the world going and stuff. And they invited Elon to this conversation. It was like their in-person interview. And there was something that I believe he said it in this. He said that, ideally when he started Tesla, or when he got Tesla going and SpaceX and all this stuff, what he really wanted to do was be the engineer, put somebody in as CEO and just play with the stuff that he likes to play with. But then he found out that it was, his own words, a moral error to do that. And he felt like he had to take on the CEO role because it was a moral error. So I wonder how much of sort of this current place we are now, where folks really do want him to delegate a lot of that communication and having a team that communicates for him. I wonder how much of that in his head is maybe a psychology that says like, well, that's not the right thing to do. I have to take this on. I am the CEO. It's a moral obligation for me to be the face. And yes, I'm going to make mistakes, but I hope people see that I'm trying to do the best here. Like, I wonder how much of that plays into his psychology as to why this hasn't happened, or why it's, I don't know, or maybe he just thinks about it differently. It's just something I wanted to throw out there, because I wonder, like, as a human being, I wonder how much of a struggle it is for him to maybe recognize he is where he's at, or maybe he doesn't have people he can trust in those roles, or maybe he's just tough giving up control.
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously an issue to how you would set this up, because you remember I think it was in 2020, he closed the communications department. There was a PR communications department in Tesla. What comes with it when you run that on a day-to-day basis? First of all, they have to have Elon's trust, right? If they have to run with every tweet and thing they want to put out to him first to get it approved, and then then the whole thing is gone.
That's the Soviet model, right? We can't make this. You've got to be able to push a certain amount of decision making down to the lowest appropriate level and build that competence of decision making into the organization. I think a lot of what he's published, like no large meetings. If you're not adding value, it's not rude to get up and leave. Don't waste people's time. I think he buys into a lot of that, but something's missing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it.
All right, let's get started. Raymond, thank you for your question. Will Alexandra take an advisory role at Twitter if Elon offered its say based on a tweet?
I have no intention to take any advisory role at Twitter or anything. I'm very happy and comfortable in my life. But I have to admit, if Elon ever calls, I mean, not that I expect that, but just let's make this sure, I would feel it's really a service. Like, people feel there's a service to their country. If he would think I could be valuable, again, I have no pretension and I don't think he will do that. But if he does, I would have to think hard not to accept it, because and even if it would really disrupt my personal life and what I've put up here, and I'm very happy with what I'm doing. But if he would feel I have something to do and to help, I would really have to consider it, even though it may not be what I aspire personally to do it, just because I do believe his mission is so big that if we can help and if he considers we're the right people to help, we should really consider it.
That's a great answer. Next question. Really good answer. Michael, should Musk purchase Nokia to advance the conversation and that side of the business? You mean
I'd
as a
rather
phone?
have him buy BlackBerry, but he won't buy a phone. My love for BlackBerry.
Yeah, I wonder if because I know he's openly talked about maybe potentially getting into, if Apple bars us from the App Store, then we're gonna have to start our own phone. Like part of me says yes, like Elon would do that if it really came to the point where he felt like his ability to propagate the sort of the ecosystem and what his morals are around free speech and everything, that it has to get done, right? Like that INTG part of it, like it has to get done. It has to get done. But I'm warming up to the fact, and people talk about this a lot. It's like, but it's such a pain in the ass to have your own phone that I don't know. I don't know if you guys think anything about that.
If this is just to circumvent the 30% tax, which is obviously not a tax, it's just a margin of Apple that they're putting on. I've been tweeting about it for weeks now. Tell everybody to put it on to subscribe on a web browser on your phone or on your desktop, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And the 30% are gone. I mean, nobody needs to subscribe on an app. I do believe he has enough on his plate. I mean, obviously Elon doesn't believe he has enough on his plate, because when you're superhuman, you can take on anything. But I do believe he'd rather concentrate on what he's doing at the moment than now start a phone company or an app store. Saying that for the app store, I do believe a Tesla app store will come anyway. So
Yeah.
I always thought that. And so that may be one way of getting into an app store type thing, business anyway.
Yeah. Next question. From Tesla Dude. Would you guys and girl do an interview with Elon? No engineering talk, just PR fluff, communication talk, and the social aspects. I mean, I can tell you right away that if say we had the opportunity, the humanity aspect of Elon to me is what's most interesting, like the psychology of it, like the pain of it, the why he's talked about the why, but like let's really dig into it. Like what's making you tick here, dude? Like it's very interesting. How do you guys think about that?
I think Lex Friedman got the closest to it. I think lots of people are actually very impressed when they talk to him, and I would be the same. I probably would faint. I mean, you always see me like, big mouth and whatever, but there is so much respect for Elon that I would really have to prepare very well to know that, how I could ask him questions and all that. I have a lot of questions that are much more related to my personal life. Like, how was immigrating to the United States? Why does it make so much sense for you to do this business in the United States rather than somewhere else? And so if he would allow me to ask the questions where I'm comfortable with and for which I haven't heard any answers from any other interviews because people don't come from that side, I'd love to do that. But I agree with you, Farzad, that the thing, we have enough information if we know how to search for it. What's his engineering prowess and where he wants to carry the world. I think he has been vocal on that, and if you want to follow that, and if you understand, or if you try to understand that there's enough there, it's more about the why of his motivations, and where does he see his own limits? That's a question nobody ever asked him, right?
Yeah, I'd participate in that interview or that panel, absolutely, for the same reasons. So,
yeah. And I think it goes without question. So there was a sort of a PR fluff communication talk. I'm sure that would naturally come up just because it would be front of mind. But I think there would be so many different layers to explore. He's just a fascinating human being. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. Let's do a few more. Next one. Should buybacks be paired with employee bonuses that have a vesting schedule? The main criticism I see is companies being greedy and just trying to boost the stock price, not my opinion. So maybe, I don't know if Alexandra, maybe you have some thoughts around that because of the buyback portion.
Well, the employee bonuses and vesting schedule has been determined a long time ago, right? That's when the employees signed on and had their contract. So I don't think the buyback will be paired with new employee bonuses. The employee bonuses is just something contractual they have in place. So I don't think that is something that will be paired. And all those that say the companies are being greedy and want to boost the stock price. I mean, one thing I can tell you, Tesla is not being greedy and trying to boost the stock price. Even the contrary. I wish they would do it a little bit, and they are not.
Any thoughts there, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants the stock price to go up. This conversation about the stock price is too high. I don't care about the stock price. That is so counter-capitalist that it's not even worth discussing, right? I don't think that we should be trying to pump the stock price, and I think people see a certain amount of hypocrisy when a few weeks ago you're telling everybody it's going to be okay and you're done selling stock, and then you liquidate more stock, the following day, and the shares absolutely get pummeled. And we're back to a trust issue. It's not that you sold the shares, it's that we feel like we've been betrayed, right? We trusted you not to sell the shares. You said that you were done XYZ. We understand circumstances change, but you can't just go secretly sell the shares and then a few days or weeks later wait for the form to come out that says that you sold and then explain it after the fact. That simply doesn't work, and it breaks public trust. At the same time, you're trying to build public trust and saying, hey, we're building a platform where this is a trusted environment. That simply doesn't work. So
yeah, that was my biggest thing from that last round of selling. And I put out a tweet that said, like, the thing that's most sacred in civilization, I feel like, is trust. And if you start degrading that is when you really get yourself in trouble. So, like,
I completely agree.
Mitigating
I think
that
the insider trading is my biggest pain point every time, and I mean, I'm saying it publicly, so they're obviously loving it now. Every time I get into a dispute with Tesla Qs on normal issues, I have answers, right? Duck, here we go. And then 3-4 tweets later, and I say, and how about Alexandra? What do you think about insider trading? And that's where, I'm speechless, because they're right. There is a lot of insider trading happening, meaning, people that have options or stock because they're working inside of Tesla and have a certain threshold, so they have to publicize them. It's always in the same sense. It's always selling, and so it doesn't help us without any explanation. I can understand people want to buy a house or want to do something else with their money. I can understand it all, but if it's repetitive and if there is no explanation for people, especially for Elon, who talks about everything else, right? When there's suddenly no comment on this very thing, it's something that's a bit bittersweet to swallow.
You bet.
Fair point. A couple more. Let's do second to last here. Would you support a Tesla phone if Apple were to charge 30% for Tesla's robotaxi charges? Oh, interesting. I don't know if it will work that way. It could, right? It very well could. Because if it's an app that's being downloaded,
exactly. If you download the Tesla app on your Apple, that's it. The 30% are there.
That'll never happen.
No.
What do you mean?
And then that's the fight he's fighting, much more than the 30% on the $8.
This robotaxi revenue is inviolate. That is a fight to the death. That's a structural issue that will never come.
Very
to pass.
Good question, Harry. True. Very, very.
It's a great question, but
that's
phenomenal. Yeah.
That's too important to the bottom line. He's already said that they'll do more robotaxi business than they will car sales in terms of revenue, right? They've already said that. That's the plan, and that's recurring revenue with very little input. We make the car.
And let me tell you. And let me tell you, Elon knew for years back, because I've been looking at his tweets, restudying them and whatever, the rabbit holes I'm going down in. He knew about those 30% a long time ago. He's commented about it a long time. This week, he's putting up the scenario. Oh, I just discovered there are 30%. Well, no. You didn't just discover. You're very clever in packaging it so that people discover it with you. But this was not the new discovery. He knew darn well where he was going. He obviously doesn't like it for the $8, sure. But you're right. The main thing is the future income on software from Tesla, because that's the money. That's where it is.
You bet.
Yeah, that's this fight now it makes so much more sense. Like, it made sense before because of the Twitter thing, but it's within the context of how incredibly gigantic FSD is going to be. Apple will basically automatically take half of all of their sales, 30% cut. And that's freaking insane. right?
Well,
Yeah,
this is going to turn into what's Twitter going to turn into, X or whatever they want to call it, right?
right,
And they've
right.
made the banking application so that they can do every
That's
form
exactly it.
of finance that they want to do. So you'll hail the car, you'll hail the robo-taxi either from your Tesla app or from the X
On
app,
Twitter.
and you'll pay for it directly in the app. It'll be direct payment to Tesla. There's not going to be any of that
Yeah.
other stuff.
But the first thing is you will not download the Twitter app on
Right.
the Apple Store and on the Google
Otherwise,
Store.
they take
That's the thing. That's where you have to get to.
right. Because I think with Uber, they take 30% of everything they make on Uber too, right? Every Uber transaction on the App Store, or 15%
Uber
or whatever.
has a special deal. I think they came up finally with a special deal, and then I launched that poll yesterday evening, and there were quite a lot of interesting comments saying Amazon doesn't allow purchase on the Kindle anymore because the Kindle is obviously downloaded with the App Store. You have to go back to the Amazon website. So there, and YouTube the same. If you do YouTube via the downloaded YouTube app from Apple Store, you pay double the price than if you do YouTube your subscription on the web browser. So they acted by giving different prices. If you want to do it on the Apple downloaded app, you pay more than if you do it on the web browser. But I just don't think Elon wants to leave them a penny, because that's not how 30% for somebody who with lots of effort finally got an operating margin of 30% by constructing cars. For him, in his mindset, it's one thing if you sell trousers and every store doubles the price when they get it in the store to sell it. That's one thing, because you have the risk of the stock, and you have the risk of these trousers not being in fashion anymore 3 months later, and you have to discount them, right? But the Apple Store is much more vicious. For the first 12 months, you pay on every monthly payment the 30%. That they get the 30% the first time they hook you in is one thing, but why is it recurrent? And then the second year, it's 15%, right? The Google Store is the Play Store is all the time at 15%. But this is a vicious way of locking people in, because they don't even realize what they're doing. They're on their app, they put it on the phone, and then they subscribe. So it's really one of those passive things. And their way of saying, well, we ensure these people are real. Well, damn, you do, because you have to have a credit card to debit, right? If nobody, no bot will have a credit card or a bank account to debit it. But once they have that payment license in Twitter, and that's actually a point I wanted to get to earlier and forgot, Ron, then they may be able to do it if you didn't download it on the App Store on the Google Store. So that brings me to that other question I forgot earlier, Ron. So they applied for that government license with FinCRA, I don't remember which entity it is in the financial world, that gives those payment money transfer licenses. I read on the internet, it can take anything from 3 months to 12 months to get this. And obviously for Twitter, that is crucial. The quicker they get it, the quicker they will make money. Absolutely. Now, could that be one of those things where us as, Twitter users, we can sort of start putting sunshine on this and say, where are you? Why is this taking so long? Is that something we should get involved?
Well, I think there's a checkered history here with Elon and the administration, right? We know this very publicly. All of this love and profession of greatness for Mary Barra. And there are things about Mary and what she does at GM that I love, with a focus on performance and some different things like that. So I'm not anti Mary Barra, but there's no comparison when we're talking of BEV innovation and adoption and all the rest of it. And it is an incredibly inappropriate and painful snub to Elon and Tesla for him to have been treated the way that he's been treated. It's an affront that's really bad. So you translate, then you look at SpaceX. Starship would have already been launched, but for the administration putting its thumb on the scale, which they have clearly done, and it's over arcane environmental, well, we need to know the impact of this on whatever locally. And they keep moving the goalpost on that. And so, yeah, that's the danger. That's been mitigated, however, I think, with the election. He's got an avenue to appeal now. The incoming Speaker of the House can have some influence and say, behind in the cloakroom, behind closed doors, and say, hey, cut it out. Let's get this guy approved. And I think it'll be far easier to overcome some of that bias now.
No.
So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. See how much effort Speaker McCarthy, incoming Speaker McCarthy, puts on this. How does somebody like Mitch McConnell, as minority leader, treat this in the Senate? Because that's still a very close vote. And, if you can have whatever it was, 13 members, whatever, yesterday, crossover from Republican to vote with Democrats for, protection of marriage, same sex, et cetera,
Yeah.
then, you can probably find Joe Manchin and a couple, 2 or 3 more pro-capitalist members in the Senate side to get the ball across the goalpost. So I think he's got a better opportunity to get that done sooner rather than later. And hopefully McCarthy and others will lean on the SpaceX launch and to get some of that thumb off the scale that's detrimental to SpaceX and those launches currently.
Awesome. Well, I think we should call it there. We could go into for another 2 hours, but my goodness,
Yes,
such a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much to the both of you for being so open and honest. Really, I hope the key goal here, we were talking about it before we went live, is like, I hope it's, we hope it's of value to those that are listening to try and understand sort of the time that we're going through. We hope it's of value for Elon and his team if they want some feedback from, the retail investment base. I think I really want to commend you both for being just so rational and logical through your processes. And I think could be, viewed upon, especially in some parts of our community that's so passionate, as, tough to sort of hear, or maybe a difficult conversation. But I really think these are the types of conversations that are the most valuable, is we really have to throw around ideas that might be uncomfortable to some, to really understand sort of the type of things we're dealing with. And if they're null and void, they're null and void. Like, okay, that's great. At least we covered them, right? So that's the intention behind this conversation. So thank you, Ron. Thank you, Alexandra. Any parting thoughts from either of you guys?
Well, one last thing I would like to mention, just people that know me and follow me for a while now, I'm actually less worried now than I was 6 months ago. I was fearing government intervention much more 6 months ago. I'm reassured that actually SpaceX helps shield Tesla, which is for me the biggest subject. I do believe Twitter is making good progress. They obviously need to improve their social skills. And I do believe that all the solutions are really low-hanging fruit. And so if Elon wants to solve them, he can solve them. So that gives me a lot of comfort.
Awesome.
I think that I would add that, thank you so much for inviting me into this conversation, Alexandra, and introducing me to Farzad. I've certainly enjoyed the time. And maybe if Tesla doesn't do something formally in terms of adding, a human face or explaining some of these issues to help calm the waters, if it helps to have a continuing conversation or forum on this through you, Farzad, and your audience out there, and it's helpful, then we should make this a continuing thing. If as long as it's adding value and helping to humanize the situation to calm it down. I agree with you, Alexandra. I feel a lot better now than I did weeks ago, or maybe even months ago. This egregious use of the thumb on the scale against SpaceX launch and things like that. So anyway, I've enjoyed the time. It's a pleasure to spend the time with two such esteemed people that you have that I would have so much respect for. So thank you for that.
Oh my goodness.
Thank
you so much for making the time. And then lastly, let's maybe do some plugs before we even go off. So Alexandra Merz has a Substack. You can find her at this website. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you all can see what I'm talking about. Find her on Substack. Look at that. I'm going to post a link to her Substack in the comments section below. And then Ron, what would you like? Is there anything you'd like to show for folks?
I've typically I'm not like my very famous sister who relishes attention. My sister's Dina Carter. She's a CMA award winner, country music star, personality, whatever you want to call. She loves the attention and she's really good with it. And I've always been satisfied to stay to operate very effectively in the background. That's fun for me. So I never really intended to tout my background to Alexandra, but there was a dust up on Twitter from someone who didn't want to acknowledge, who didn't want to acknowledge that you have to be careful. You never know who you're going to encounter on the platform, right? And that there are a lot of really smart people who've been around, or they're credentialed, or what have you. And so that's the only reason why I mentioned any of my background to Alexandra. But if there's
and I jumped on it, Farzad. I was like, "This is my man."
So I guess this is my way of saying, if I need to get past my inner introvert and put something up that's helpful for the audience that would be complementary to what you both do, then maybe we can have that conversation in a DM, and I can be a little bit more active. So.
Okay. Well, perfect. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. And now I pushed you a little bit, and I think it was of high value for everybody who listens. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't get pushed into anything that I don't want to do. So I've had a great time. I was happy to be pushed.
Good.
Awesome. Very happy to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for keeping the comments respectful, everybody. And if you enjoyed, give us a like, and we'll see you on the next one, everybody. Hey, take us off.
We got to talk guitar.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we do have to talk to guitar. Oh my God. Yeah.
So what next time?
Yeah. Good time, and we'll figure it out. Okay.
Let's do it. I would love to.
All right.
Would love
Thank
to.
you, guys.